Our mommy's doing a store gym.
Our mommy's...
Sorry, she's late.
The mission clock was ticking and Mark was already taking casualties. He checked his watch. 19:02, 2 minutes past the rendezvous time. In the Marine Corps, 2 minutes late wasn't just tardiness. It was a tactical failure. It was a missed extraction. It was the difference between cover and exposure. But here, in the dim, amber-lit purgatory of Giovanni's Italian bistro, 2 minutes was just a social faux pas. Mark adjusted his tie for the 5th time. The silk felt like a garrote against his throat. He caught his reflection in the darkened window to his left and barely recognized the man staring back. The reflection looked softer than he felt. At 38, Mark still carried himself with the rigid, kinetic posture of a staff sergeant, though it had been 3 years since he'd hung up the uniform. His shoulders were squared, his haircut was severe, and his eyes scanned the perimeter of the dining room with a vigilance that made the busboys nervous. Civvies didn't fit him right. The suit jacket, though tailored, felt like a costume. He felt exposed without the weight of armor, naked without a clear objective. "Just get out there, Mark," his sister Clara's voice echoed in his head, nagging him from a memory 3 days old. He could still see her standing in his living room, a room that was aggressively clean, organized with a precision that bordered on pathology. Not a magazine out of place, coasters aligned. The silence in his house was heavy, a physical weight that pressed against the eardrums. "You're drowning in this house," Clara had said, gesturing to the vacuum lines in the carpet. "It's been 5 years, Mark. Elena wouldn't want you living in a museum." The mention of Elena's name had hit him like a kinetic strike. "I'm not drowning. I'm maintaining..." "You're patrolling," Clara had corrected gently. "You're patrolling an empty zone. I met a woman at yoga, Sarah. She's nice. She's complicated, but nice. Just dinner. 1 hour. If you hate it, you can come home and reorganize your spice rack by molecular weight." So here he was. 1905. He unfolded his napkin, smoothing it over his lap until not a single crease remained. He reached for his water glass, his hand steady, betraying none of the anxiety churning in his gut. The condensation on the glass was the only cold thing in the room. The air was thick with the smell of roasted garlic, expensive perfume, and the low, murmuring hum of intimacy. He looked around. It was a mistake to look around. To his right, a young couple was sharing a tiramisu. Their forks clinking, their heads bent close together in a conspiracy of laughter. To his left, an older couple sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes from decades of shared battles and truces. Everywhere he looked, he saw connection. He saw units of 2. Teams. Mark felt like a ghost haunting a celebration of life. He was a singular point of data in a room full of pairs. 1912. The waiter, a young man with a wispy mustache and a nervous energy, approached the table. He hesitated, sensing the force field of tension radiating from Mark. Can I get you an appetizer while you wait, sir? Perhaps the calamari?" "It's excellent tonight." Mark looked up. He didn't mean to glare, but his resting face was calibrated for briefing rooms, not bistros. "No," he softened his tone, forcing a civilian smile that felt tight on his face. "No, thank you. I'm sure she's just parking." "Traffic is terrible on 4th Street, the waiter offered diplomatically. "I'll give you a few more minutes." Mark watched him retreat. Traffic. That was the civilian excuse for everything. In his old life, if you hit traffic, you found a secondary route. You improvised. You adapted. You overcame. You didn't leave your partner exposed in the drop zone. He took a sip of water. The silence at his table was becoming conspicuous. He could feel the eyes of the other patrons sliding over him, pitying glances, quick assessments. "Look at the soldier boy," they seemed to say, all dressed up with nowhere to go. It wasn't just the embarrassment that stung. It was the familiarity of the void. The empty chair opposite him wasn't just a piece of furniture. It was a monument to the last 5 years. Since Elena died, Mark had become an expert in solitude. He ate dinner standing over the sink. He went to movies alone and sat in the back row. He had built a fortress of routine to keep the grief out, but tonight, the drawbridge was down and nothing was coming across. 1925, Mark began to run the tactical analysis of the situation. Variable A, she forgot. Variable B, Clara showed her a photo, and she decided he looked too intense. Variable C. She arrived, saw him through the window, the stiff man checking his watch, and decided to keep driving. Variable C seemed the most likely. He knew he wasn't fun. He didn't know how to talk about pop culture or the weather. He knew how to secure a perimeter. He knew how to fix a carburetor with a multi-tool. He knew how to grieve in silence. None of those were great openers for a blind date. He looked at the empty place setting across from him. The silverware was polished to a shine. The wine glass was upside down, waiting to be filled. It looked accusatory. Abort, his instincts whispered. Cut your losses, regroup at base. But he had promised Clara, and deeper down, a small, treacherous part of him had wanted this. He had wanted to hear a voice across the table that wasn't on a television screen. He had wanted to be looked at by a woman who didn't look at him like he was a broken hero or a tragic widower, but just a man. 1935, the hope died quietly. It was a clean kill. Mark let out a long breath through his nose. He signaled the waiter, not with a wave, but with a sharp nod. The young man hurried over, looking apologetic, as if he personally were responsible for the no-show. "Sir? Check for the water," Mark said. His voice was gravel, rougher than he intended. "It's on the house, sir. Please, don't worry about it." Mark reached into his wallet and pulled out a $20 bill. He placed it on the table, aligning the edge of the bill perfectly with the edge of the table. "For the table. For your time. Sir, you really don't. Take it." It was an order, not a suggestion. Mark pushed his chair back. The scrape of wood against the floor sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. He stood up, buttoning his jacket with a snap. He felt the heat rising in his neck, the burning humiliation of the rejected. He had survived firefights in Kandahar that were less stressful than this silent surrender. He turned toward the door. He just had to make the walk. 30 feet to the exit. Keep the eyes forward. Don't engage the targets. Ignore the pity. He took the first step. The front door of the restaurant swung open with a violence that made half the patrons jump. It wasn't the wind. It was an entry breach. Into the hushed, candlelit atmosphere marched a small army. There were 4 of them. They were small, they were loud, and they were moving with zero formation discipline. Leading the charge was a boy, maybe 10 years old, wearing a Spider-Man t-shirt under a suit blazer that was 2 sizes too big. The sleeves covered his hands. Behind him was a girl of about 8, clutching a spiral notebook to her chest like a ballistic shield. Behind her, a 6-year-old boy with untied shoelaces was trying to walk backward, tripping over his own feet. And bringing up the rear was a toddler, perhaps 3, dragging a stuffed penguin by one wing, the bird's beak bumping rhythmically against the floorboards. They looked frantic. They looked disheveled. They looked like they had just escaped a natural disaster. The restaurant went dead silent. The maitre d', a man who prided himself on the exclusivity of his establishment, looked as if he were about to have a stroke. Mark froze in the middle of the aisle. He watched the oldest boy's eyes sweep the room. The kid was scanning for a target. It was almost impressive. The boy's gaze skipped over the couples, the families, and locked onto Mark, the only man standing alone, buttoned up, looking like he was about to report for duty. The boy's eyes narrowed. He turned to his siblings and signaled. The phalanx moved. They ignored the hostess who was trying to intercept them. They dodged a waiter carrying a tray of minestrone. They marched straight up to Mark. The oldest boy stopped 2 feet from Mark's polished shoes. He was out of breath, his hair sticking up in a cowlick that defied the laws of physics. He looked Mark up and down, assessing the threat level. "Are you Mark?" the boy demanded, his voice cracking slightly but holding firm. Mark blinked. His military bearing kicked in instinctively. He squared his shoulders. "I am." The boy let out a breath he seemed to have been holding since the parking lot. He gestured to the 3 siblings behind him, who were now staring at Mark with wide, saucer-like eyes. The toddler wiped his nose on the penguin. "Our mommy's sorry she's late," the boy announced, his voice ringing through the quiet restaurant like a bugle call. Mark stared at the boy. The boy stared back, his chest heaving under the oversized blazer. "Your mommy?" Mark repeated. The words felt foreign in the hushed elegance of Giovanni's. "She's parking the van." The 8-year-old girl whispered, stepping out from behind her brother's flank. She was clutching her notebook so tightly her knuckles were white. It's hard to park because the side door doesn't slide right. You have to kick it. We had to get out first so she could kick it. And the babysitter threw up, the 6-year-old boy added, stepping into the circle of conversation with alarming confidence. He had a smear of something chocolate, mud, on his cheek. Like everywhere, it was a fountain. It was gross. It was green. Green! The toddler echoed, slamming the stuffed penguin onto the white tablecloth with a dull thud. A salt shaker wobbled dangerously. Mark looked at the salt shaker. He looked at the penguin. He looked at the maitre d', who was approaching with the grim determination of a man about to call security. But before Mark could process the logistics of this invasion, or the maitre d' could initiate the ejection protocol, the restaurant door opened again. This time, it wasn't a breach. It was a crash landing. Sarah stumbled in. She was stunning, but in the way a wildfire is stunning, beautiful, consuming, and utterly out of control. Her dark hair was escaping a clip in frantic wisps. She was wearing a dress that might have been elegant in a previous life, but was now wrinkled at the hip. She was wearing one heel and holding the other in her hand because the strap had clearly snapped in the line of duty. She scanned the room, wild-eyed, spotted the cluster of small humans surrounding Mark, and rushed forward, her stockinged foot sliding slightly on the polished floor. "Oh my God," she gasped, dropping the broken shoe onto the carpet. She looked at the maitre d', then at the silent diners, and finally at Mark. Her face was a kaleidoscope of mortification. "I am so sorry," she breathed. She was winded. "You're Mark. I'm Sarah. I'm—" "A disaster?" She looked down at the kids. "Leo, I told you to wait by the hostess stand." "The hostess looked mean," Leo defended, adjusting his blazer. "And we saw him. He looked lonely." Sarah flinched. She turned back to Mark, her eyes pleading. "The sitter called at 6:30. It was the stomach flu. I didn't have your number because Clara gave it to me on a sticky note, and Toby—" She pointed to the toddler. "Toby ate the sticky note, literally ate it. I couldn't cancel. I didn't want to stand you up. I thought I could drop them at my mom's, but she's in Florida, which I forgot because I haven't slept in 3 years." She took a deep, shuddering breath. "So, I'm here. To tell you I'm sorry. And to pay for your drink." She reached for Toby's hand, her shoulders sagging in defeat. "Come on, guys. Let's go. We'll get nuggets at the drive-thru. Let the nice man enjoy his peace." She turned to leave. The rejection in her posture was total. She wasn't just leaving a date. She was retreating from the very idea that she deserved one. Mark watched her. He saw the juice stain on her blouse. He saw the dark circles under her eyes that concealer couldn't quite hide. He saw a woman who was fighting a war on 4 fronts with no air support. He looked at the empty chair he had been staring at for 20 minutes. Then he looked at the kids. Leo was trying to look brave, but his lip was trembling. The girl, Mia, was looking at the floor. The shoelace boy, Sam, was eyeing the breadbasket on the neighboring table with the focus of a sniper. Mark felt something click in his chest. It was a mechanical sound like the safety coming off a rifle. It was the sudden, sharp clarity of a situation report. Situation: friendly forces in disarray. Objective: restore morale. Secure sustenance. Action: engage. "Stand down," Mark said. His voice wasn't loud, but it had the specific, resonant timbre of a staff sergeant addressing a platoon. It cut through the ambient noise of the restaurant like a knife. Sarah froze mid-turn. "What?" Mark moved. He didn't just stand up, he deployed. He pulled out the chair opposite him. "Sit down, Sarah," he said. It wasn't a question, but— "The kids," she stammered, gesturing helplessly to her brood. "Mark, look around. This is Giovanni's. They don't have a kids menu. They have truffle oil and silence. We can't stay." Mark looked at the waiter, the young man who had previously been sympathetic but was now looking at his manager with panic. Mark caught the waiter's eye. He gave him the look. It was the look that had once made a private first-class scrub a latrine with a toothbrush until it gleamed. It was a look that communicated, "We are doing this, and you are going to help me." "We're going to need 4 more chairs," Mark said to the waiter, his voice calm and level. "We need to reconfigure the perimeter. 2 chairs on the flanks, 2 at the foot." The waiter blinked. "Sir, the fire code?" "There is ample egress," Mark countered. Bring the chairs and bring the bread, not the artisan slices. Bring the basket. Bring 2 baskets, stat. He turned back to Sarah. She was staring at him as if he had just spoken Greek. I've eaten MREs in a sandstorm with sandflies trying to crawl up my nose, Sarah, Mark said, a small, genuine smile finally breaking the mask of his face. I think I can handle truffle oil and a few nuggets. Please, sit. Sarah looked at him. She searched his face for the joke, the sarcasm, the inevitable polite rejection. She found only steady, slate-blue eyes. Slowly, as if she couldn't quite believe her legs were obeying, she sat. Shoes off is a bold tactical choice, Mark noted, glancing at her stockinged foot. Sarah let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. I broke the heel on the curb. It was a casualty of war. We mourn the fallen, Mark said solemnly. He turned to the kids who were still standing in a clustered formation. Troops, fall in. Take your positions. The next hour was not a dinner. It was a joint military operation. The staff, realizing that resistance was futile against Mark's calm authority, brought the chairs. The intimate table for 2 was transformed into a cramped, chaotic command center for 6. Mark took the head of the table. Sarah took the foot. The kids filled the sides. I'm Leo, the oldest boy said, scrambling into his chair and extending a hand across the table. I'm the man of the house when Mom's busy. I'm 10, Mark shook the hand firmly. Good to meet you, Leo. I'm Mark, former U.S. Marine Corps. Infantry. The words hit the table like a grenade. The boy's eyes went wide. Even Toby stopped chewing on the penguin's beak. A Marine? Sam gasped. Like Call of Duty? Better, Mark said. Because the graphics are real. Did you fight bad guys? Sam asked, vibrating with excitement. Sarah stiffened slightly, her protective instinct flaring. Mark saw it. He leaned in, lowering his voice to a confidential whisper. I help people, Mark corrected gently. Being a Marine isn't just about fighting. It's about keeping the bad things away so the good things can grow. Sometimes that meant fighting. Mostly it meant making sure everyone was safe. Walking point. Watching the line. Like a superhero? Toby asked. Like a job? Mark smiled. But a very serious one. The menus arrived. They were heavy, leather-bound, and entirely in Italian. Sarah looked at them with despair. They won't eat any of this. It's all reduction and foam. Mark didn't open his menu. He looked at the waiter. We need a sit-trip on off-menu assets, Mark said. The waiter, who was starting to look like he was enjoying the sheer absurdity of the situation, pulled out his pad. Sir? Pasta, Mark ordered. Fusilli or penne, red sauce. On the side, butter for the little one. Chicken, grilled, plain, no green stuff, no garnish. If I see a sprig of parsley, I'm sending it back. And a bottle of the house, red for the lady. The biggest bottle you have. And for you, sir, the lasagna, Mark said. And keep the water coming. We're going to need hydration. As the waiter scurried off, the table settled into a dull roar. Sarah took a long sip of the water Mark had poured for her. The panic had started to fade from her face, replaced by a soft, bewildered curiosity. You're handling this alarmingly well, she said, leaning forward. Most guys would have climbed out the bathroom window by now. I actually checked the window size when we walked in, just in case I needed to escape. Mark reached over and cut Toby's chicken, which had arrived with miraculous speed, into precise, uniform cubes. My house is very quiet, Sarah. My floors are clean. My books are alphabetized. He paused, wiping a smudge of butter off Toby's chin. I'm not a big fan of quiet anymore. It rings in your ears after a while. Well, she laughed, a genuine throaty sound that made Mark's heart do a strange stutter step. You've come to the right place. My life is loud, it's sticky, it's a lot. It's a circus where the monkeys run the show. I like a lot, Mark said. And he realized with a jolt that he meant it. The breadbasket arrived, and with it, the first crisis. Sam, eyes locked on a breadstick that was slightly larger than the others, lunged. His elbow clipped a full goblet of ice water. Time seemed to warp. Sarah gasped. Leo shouted, "Incoming!" The glass tipped. The physics were undeniable. It was going to flood the table, soak the linen, and probably drench Mark's lap. Mark didn't think. He didn't calculate. His body remembered before his mind could process. His left hand shot out with the speed of a striking cobra. It was a movement born of 1,000 drills, 1,000 moments where a fraction of a second meant life or death. He caught the glass mid-tumble, inches from the white linen. The water sloshed violently against the rim but didn't spill a drop. He stabilized it, righted it, and set it back down in one fluid, silent motion. The table went dead silent. Leo's mouth hung open. "Whoa, ninja," Sam whispered reverently. Mark adjusted his cuff, feeling a flush of heat rise up his neck. "Reflexes," he muttered. Sarah was staring at him. Her eyes were wide, dark, and dilated. "Okay," she murmured, her voice dropping an octave. "That was impressive." She covered her mouth, her face turning pink. "And a little hot? Sorry, did I say that out loud?" Mark laughed. It was a rusty sound, like an engine turning over after a long winter, but it felt good. "You did. I really need that wine," she said. As the dinner progressed, the dynamic shifted. Mark wasn't just the date, he was the acting commander. He showed Leo how to use a knife and fork properly, turning it into a lesson on tool maintenance. "It's a tool, Leo. Respect the tool. Leverage, not force." He listened to Mia explain the complex social hierarchy of her third-grade class with the seriousness of an intelligence briefing. He played peekaboo with Toby using a napkin, turning the simple game into a drill on object permanence. But mostly he watched Sarah, he watched her relax. He saw the way she seamlessly managed the chaos, wiping a face here, answering a question there, cutting food without looking while still trying to engage with him. She was a veteran in her own war. She was tired, yes, but she was resilient. There was a strength in her softness that Mark found captivating. By the time the main courses were demolished and the table was covered in crumbs, crayon drawings on the backs of receipts, and empty sweetener packets, the atmosphere had changed. The patrons around them had stopped glaring and started watching with amused smiles. "So," Sarah said, once the plates were cleared. She swirled the last of her wine. "The kids were occupied with a game of I Spy. Clara told me you were a widower." The air at the table changed. It didn't get heavier, but it got denser. The kids seemed to sense the shift in frequency and quieted down. "Yes," Mark said, his hands resting on the table, thumbs interlocked. 5 years. "I'm sorry," Sarah said softly. She didn't offer platitudes. She didn't say, "It gets better." She just held his gaze. "My husband, he didn't die, he just left. 3 years ago." Said he needed to find himself. "He's in Oregon now, making artisanal yurts or something. We're what he left behind." She looked down at her hands. "He said we were too much noise, too much responsibility. He wanted a backpack and a trail, not a mortgage and 4 kids." Mark looked at the 4 faces looking up at him. Leo trying to be the man, Mia the worrier, Sam the dreamer, Toby the innocent. "He's an idiot," Mark said. It wasn't an opinion. It was a statement of fact. Leo looked up, surprised. "That's a bad word. It's a descriptive word," Mark said firmly. He looked at Sarah. "To leave a team like this? To abandon his post when the mission gets hard? That's dereliction of duty." "In my world, you go to the brig for that." Sarah's eyes shimmered. A tear escaped, cracking through the concealer. She reached across the chaotic table, dodging a breadstick and a crayon, and touched Mark's hand. Her skin was warm. "We're a lot of baggage, Mark," she whispered. "I know that. I wanted to come tonight just to be Sarah for an hour. Not Mom, just Sarah, but..." She gestured to the kids. "We come as a set. It's a package deal. And it's a heavy package." Mark turned his hand over and squeezed hers. His palm was calloused. Hers was soft but strong. "Sarah," he said, "I came here tonight expecting an empty table. I was sitting here for 20 minutes checking my watch, feeling sorry for myself because the chair was empty. I was staring at a ghost." He looked at Toby, who was currently wearing a pasta noodle like a mustache and giggling. He looked at Leo, who was watching him with a desperate hopefulness. "This?" Mark gestured to the group. "This isn't baggage. Baggage is dead weight. Baggage slows you down." He looked Sarah in the eye. "This is supplies," he said. "This is reinforcements. A squad isn't a burden, Sarah. A squad is how you survive." Sarah squeezed his hand back, hard. She didn't say anything, but her smile was blinding. It was the smile of someone who had been holding the line alone for a very long time and had just seen the cavalry crest the hill. "I need to go to the bathroom," Sam announced loudly, breaking the moment. "I'll take him," Mark said, standing up. "Leo, hold the perimeter." "Sir, yes, sir," Leo said, sitting up straighter. Mark took Sam's hand. As they walked toward the restroom, Sam looked up at him. "Are you really a ninja?" "Only on Tuesdays," Mark said. "Today is Tuesday. Then you're in luck." Mark looked back at the table. Sarah was laughing at something Mia said, wiping her eyes. The table was a mess. It was loud. It was chaotic. It was the most beautiful thing he had seen in 5 years. The waiter passed by, catching Mark's eye. The waiter gave a thumbs up. Mark nodded. "Mission status, ongoing." The waiter placed the leather folder on the table with the ginger reverence of a bomb disposal technician handling a live wire. He stepped back, hands clasped behind his back, waiting for the inevitable detonation of awkwardness. Sarah was faster. Her hand shot out, snatching the folder before it fully hit the linen. "I'm paying," she announced, her voice leaving no room for negotiation. She fumbled with her purse, which was currently wedged between a juice cup and a pile of crayon-covered napkins. "For the noise, for the spilled water, for the psychological trauma inflicted upon you and the staff of Giovanni's, and for the bread." "My God, the amount of bread." Mark watched her struggle to extract her wallet. He didn't move immediately. He just watched the frantic, earnest energy she poured into this simple act. She was desperate to prove she wasn't a charity case, that she wasn't just a chaotic single mom looking for a meal ticket. She wanted to be an equal, even if her life felt unequal to his in every measurable metric of order and stability. He reached out, his hand covering hers. It was a gentle containment, arresting her movement. "Sarah?" "No, Mark, I'm serious," she said, looking up, her eyes wide and slightly frantic. "I crashed your evening. I brought a platoon of hungry children to a place that serves garnish as an appetizer. It's the least I can do." Mark gently pried the folder from her fingers. "The gentleman pays," he said softly. "But, Sarah," Mark interrupted, his voice dropping to that low, resonant register that seemed to vibrate in the table. "You didn't crash my evening. You saved it." She paused, her hand hovering in midair. "Saved it?" "I told you," Mark said, opening the folder and sliding his card inside without looking at the total. "I was staring at an empty chair? I was counting the minutes until I could leave and go home to a house that is too big and too quiet. You brought—" He gestured around the table. Toby was asleep, his face mashed into the tablecloth. Leo was constructing a tower out of sugar packets. Mia was quietly drawing a picture of Mark on her napkin. Sam was trying to balance a spoon on his nose. "You brought life," Mark finished. "And entertainment? This is the best company I've had in 5 years. So the gentleman pays. Consider it an investment in morale." Sarah lowered her hand. A flush rose in her cheeks, distinct from the wine. She offered a small, crooked smile. "Okay, thank you, Mark. Really?" Mark nodded at the waiter, who whisked the folder away with relief. "All right, team," Mark announced, clapping his hands once. The sound was sharp, authoritative. "The mess hall is closing. Prepare for extraction." Leo snapped to attention, knocking over his sugar tower. "Extraction? We are moving out," Mark said. "Check your sectors. Do not leave any equipment behind. No toy left behind. No shoe left behind." Sarah scrambled to find her broken shoe under the table. Mia gathered her crayons with surgical precision. Sam grabbed the spoon he had been balancing. "Put the spoon back, soldier," Mark said without looking. Sam grinned and put the spoon back. Mark stood up and walked to the foot of the table where Toby was unconscious. The toddler was a dead weight, limp and heavy with carb-induced slumber. Sarah moved to pick him up, but she was already juggling her purse, the diaper bag, and her broken shoe. "I've got the payload," Mark said. He scooped Toby up. The boy was surprisingly heavy, a dense bundle of warmth and potential energy. Toby shifted, sighed, and immediately rested his head on Mark's shoulder, a string of drool connecting his mouth to Mark's expensive suit jacket. Mark didn't flinch. He adjusted his hold, supporting the boy's head with a hand that had once held rifles and radios. The feeling of the small, rhythmic breathing against his neck triggered a memory so old and sharp it almost hurt, the memory of his own daughter, years ago, before the cancer, before the silence. But the pain didn't sting this time. It felt like a muscle stretching after a long atrophy. "Okay," Mark said. "Leo, you're on point. Mia, Sam, center formation. Sarah, your rear guard. Move out." The exit was just as conspicuous as the entrance, but the energy had shifted. They weren't an invading horde anymore. They were a unit. The patrons who had stared with annoyance when they arrived now watched with a mixture of amusement and curiosity. They saw the tall man in the suit carrying the sleeping child, the ragtag group of kids marching with purpose, and the harried but smiling woman limping behind them. The maitre d' held the door open. "Good night, sir." "Ma'am, thank you," Mark nodded. "The lasagna was excellent." "Tell the chef the troops were satisfied." "I will, sir." They stepped out into the cool night air. The streetlights hummed. The transition from the warm, garlic-scented air of the restaurant to the crisp evening was jarring but refreshing. "Where is the transport?" Mark asked. "Round the corner," Sarah said, pointing. "The silver beast, you can't miss it. It's the one that looks like it lost a fight with a shopping cart." They walked to the van. It was a Honda Odyssey that had seen hard combat. There was a dent in the rear bumper, a sticker of a stick-figure family that was peeling at the edges, and a layer of dust that served as a canvas for finger-drawn doodles. Mark waited while Sarah unlocked the doors. The electronic lock chirped a weak, dying sound. "Battery's going," Mark noted automatically. "Add it to the list," Sarah sighed. She slid the side door open. It groaned, resisted, and then rattled open on its track. The interior of the van was a revelation. It smelled of stale Cheerios, old gym socks, and faint vanilla air freshener fighting a losing battle. The floor was a topography of discarded toys, wrappers, and school papers. To Mark, whose own car was vacuumed weekly and smelled only of leather and discipline, it should have been repulsive. Instead, it felt lived in. It felt like a cockpit that had seen heavy action. "Okay, load up," Sarah commanded. Leo climbed into the back row. Mia and Sam took the middle captain's chairs. Mark leaned into the dim interior to deposit Toby into his car seat. It was a complex contraption of plastic and fabric, a torture device designed by engineers who hated parents. Toby stirred but didn't wake. Mark maneuvered the boy's arms through the straps. He found the buckles. Click, click. He reached for the chest clip, but the strap was twisted, a common malfunction. Sarah appeared at his shoulder, breathless. "Here, let me." "That strap is a nightmare. You have to twist it and pull simultaneously." "I've got it," Mark murmured. He didn't force it. He used his thumbs to trace the webbing, finding the fold. With a deft, practice motion, the same muscle memory used to clear a jammed chamber in the dark, he flattened the strap, slid the clip up, and snapped it shut. Click, he gave the straps a tug, taut, secure. "Check," he whispered. He backed out of the van and stood up, brushing a crumb off his lapel. Sarah was staring at him. In the harsh yellow light of the parking lot street lamp, she looked exhausted, vulnerable, and incredibly beautiful. "You fixed the strap," she said. "I've been fighting with that strap for 6 months." "It was just twisted," Mark said. "System maintenance." Sarah leaned against the closed door of the van. The kids were already arguing over who had touched whom, their voices muffled by the glass. "So," Sarah said. She crossed her arms, hugging herself against the chill. "That happened. It did. This is the part where you run," she said, offering him a preemptive out. She forced a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You've seen the chaos. You've seen the vomit story. You've had the drool on the suit. You're a nice guy, Mark. You don't have to pretend. You can just say, 'Nice meeting you,' and go back to your quiet, clean life. I won't blame you. Honestly, I wouldn't blame you at all." Mark looked at her. He saw the defense mechanism slamming into place, the blast shield she had erected to protect herself from another departure. Her husband had left because it was too much. She expected Mark to do the same. Mark stepped closer. He invaded her personal space, just enough to be felt. "Sarah," he said. She looked up. "I don't retreat," Mark said. The words hung in the air between them, heavier than the night. You don't? She whispered. I'm a Marine, Mark said. We don't run from a fight. And we definitely don't run from a good thing just because the logistics are complicated. He looked at the van, rocking slightly as Sam and Leo wrestled in the back. My life has been very orderly for a long time, Mark continued. I wake up, I work out, I clean, I sleep. It's safe. It's predictable. He looked back at her. It's also incredibly boring. I didn't realize how bored I was until a 6-year-old asked me if I was a ninja. Sarah laughed, a wet, shimmering sound. Sam thinks the mailman is a spy. His bar is low. My bar isn't, Mark said intensely. I meant what I said inside. That wasn't baggage. That was a squad. And a squad needs a point man. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. You mentioned a soccer game. Sarah blinked, wiping a stray tear from her cheek. Saturday. The park on Elm. It's a lot, Mark. It's screaming parents and orange slices and mud. What time is kickoff? 10 a.m., but we usually get there late because... Well, look at us. Mark tapped a note into his phone. Saturday. 1,000 hours. Park on Elm. He looked at her. I'll be there at 0945. Sarah smiled, and this time the defense shields lowered. The smile reached her eyes, crinkling the corners. You know, with 4 kids, if you're on time, you're basically a wizard. If you're on time, you're late, Mark corrected with a grin. If you're early, you're on time. You are going to be so annoying, she laughed. I can tell already. I prefer efficient, Mark countered. Leo is going to worship you. You know that, right? He misses having a guy around to ask about guy stuff, explosions, knots. I know a lot about knots, Mark promised. A silence stretched between them, but it wasn't the heavy, accusatory silence of the restaurant wait. It was a warm, charged silence. Can I? Mark hesitated. It had been a long time since he had done this. The tactical manual for dating was rusty. Can I call you tomorrow? For a debrief? Sarah nodded. I'd like that, maybe around 8. Once the troops are down? 2,000 hours. Copy that. He didn't kiss her. It wasn't the time. The audience in the van was watching through the glass, noses pressed against the window. Instead, he reached out and squeezed her shoulder, a solid, grounding touch. Drive safe, Sarah. Check your mirrors. Aye, aye, Captain. She saluted mockingly, but her eyes were soft. She climbed into the driver's seat. The engine turned over with a reluctant wheeze, followed by a squeal of a loose belt. Mark made a mental note. Check alternator belt tension. He stood on the curb and watched as the van pulled away. Leo waved frantically from the back window. Mark stood at attention and offered a sharp, crisp salute. Leo's face lit up and he saluted back. Mark watched until the taillights disappeared around the corner. He turned and walked toward his car. It was a black sedan, parked perfectly between the lines, shining under the street lamp. It was a beautiful machine. Precision engineered, silent. He unlocked it and slid into the driver's seat. The smell of leather and stillness greeted him. For the last 5 years, this silence had been his sanctuary. It had been the place where he could breathe without the suffocating weight of grief, but also without the intrusion of life. Now, as he sat there, the silence felt different. It felt thin, it felt empty. He looked in the rearview mirror. He adjusted it, habitual checking of his 6. The eyes staring back at him were different than the ones he had seen in the restaurant window 2 hours ago. The haunted look was gone. The hardness around the mouth had softened. He wiped a smear of toddler drool off his lapel. He looked at it on his finger. He smiled. He started the engine. The dashboard lit up with a soft blue glow. He reached for the radio dial. It was set to NPR, quiet, informative, serious. He turned the dial. He spun it past the news, past the classical station, until he found a station playing classic rock. The opening chords of a Rolling Stones song filled the cabin. He turned the volume up. Mark put the car in gear. He wasn't just driving back to an empty house. He was returning to base to resupply. He had intel, he had a schedule, he had a mission. He tapped the steering wheel to the rhythm of the drums. Oh, 945, he said aloud to the empty car. He pulled out of the lot, merging into traffic. The city lights blurred past him. For the first time in 5 years, Mark wasn't just surviving the patrol. He was looking forward to the next engagement. The soldier had found his war. And this time, the objective was love.